"Take my daughters as payment," they said, but the rancher saw them as human, not property. The sun was rising over the small, dusty village where the Rahman family lived. The air was cool, but the worries that hung over the family made the morning feel heavy. Their little farm, which had once been full of life and laughter, now lay quiet. The crops had failed for 2 seasons in a row, and the few animals they had were weak and sick. Every day, the father, Bilal, worked from sunrise to sunset, trying to find a way to feed his family, but no matter how hard he tried, it was never enough. Bilal had 3 daughters, Amina, Fatima, and Sana, who were the light of his life. They were young, bright, and full of energy. Amina, the oldest, had sharp eyes that seemed to notice everything. Fatima, the middle one, had a calm heart and always tried to help wherever she could. Sana, the youngest, was playful and curious, always asking questions about the world. The girls loved their home, even though it was small and worn, because it was filled with memories and love. But love and memories could not pay the bills. Their debts had grown so large that they were impossible to ignore. Moneylenders came to the house every few days, speaking harsh words and reminding Bilal of what he owed. "If you cannot pay, we will take what is owed to us," they said. At first, Bilal thought they meant money or land, but one day, the words froze him in his place. One of the men looked directly at Bilal and said, "You cannot pay, so we will take your daughters instead." The words hung in the air, heavy and cruel. Bilal could not believe what he was hearing. His mind raced, trying to understand. Could someone really take his daughters as payment? They were not objects or property. They were his children, his responsibility, his heart. But in this poor village, where rules and kindness were sometimes ignored, it seemed that people saw others as tools or objects rather than human beings. He looked at his daughters, who were playing nearby, laughing and chasing each other around the old well. Their innocent joy cut through his fear like a knife. The thought that they might be taken from him was unbearable. He felt anger rise in his chest, but also fear. How could he protect them when he had no money, no army, no power? He felt small, helpless, and desperate. The girls sensed their father's worry. They ran to him, asking what was wrong. Bilal could not bring himself to speak the words that had been thrown at him, so he held them close and whispered, "Do not worry. I will keep you safe." He promised them, even though inside he had no clear plan. His heart ached with the thought of losing them, and for the first time in many years he felt truly afraid. Days passed, and the tension in the house grew. The moneylenders visited more frequently, each time reminding Bilal that if he could not pay, his daughters would be taken. The family barely ate, working tirelessly to try to earn something, anything, to pay off the debt. Neighbors watched quietly, some offering sympathetic looks, others turning away. Everyone in the village knew about the cruel deal, but few dared to speak. Poverty and fear kept most people silent. One evening, as Bilal sat outside the small wooden house, watching the sun disappear behind the distant hills, he saw a man approaching. The man was a rancher named Karim, who lived a few miles away. Karim was known for his fair treatment of people and animals alike. He had a reputation for honesty, compassion, and courage. Seeing him walking toward the Rahman house gave Bilal a small flicker of hope. Karim greeted Bilal warmly, though he noticed the worry etched into the man's face. Bilal explained the situation in hushed, hurried words, afraid that even speaking too loudly might bring the moneylenders sooner. Karim listened carefully, his eyes narrowing with concern. He could feel the weight of the family's suffering, and he understood immediately the danger the girls were in. He knew that poverty could push people to desperate actions, but he also knew that no one should be treated as less than human. Karim asked Bilal to show him the daughters. When the girls appeared, cautious but curious, Karim's expression softened. They were young, yes, but their eyes shone with intelligence, and their spirits seemed strong despite their fear and hardship. He could see the potential in them, the hope that still existed in the family despite their struggles. Kareem promised Bilal that he would help, though he did not yet know exactly how. For the first time, Bilal felt a small relief, a tiny spark of hope that perhaps his daughters would not be lost to greed. The days that followed were tense. The moneylenders came less frequently, perhaps sensing that the rancher was involved, but Bilal and his daughters still lived in fear. Every sound outside the house made the girls jump. Every stranger brought questions and anxiety. But Kareem visited often, quietly giving small gifts of food or supplies, helping the family in ways that could go unnoticed. He spoke gently to the girls, teaching them small lessons about courage and kindness. Even when he could not protect them directly, he showed them that someone saw them as people, not as objects to be traded. One afternoon, as the girls worked in the small garden behind the house, Kareem sat nearby, watching them. Amina was carefully planting seeds in neat rows, while Fatima watered them with care. Sana was chasing a butterfly, giggling as it darted around the flowers. Kareem's heart ached to see their joy mixed with fear. He knew he had to do more than just give advice and supplies. He had to find a way to protect them completely, to give them a chance at a real life. Kareem began thinking of ways to help the family pay off their debt, ways to protect the daughters without putting them in more danger. He knew it would not be easy. The moneylenders were powerful and ruthless. They expected obedience and feared nothing. But Kareem also knew that courage and compassion could change lives. He decided that he would not wait for others to act. He would find a solution himself, even if it meant facing danger. Meanwhile, the daughters began to notice the kindness of the rancher. At first, they were shy and unsure, afraid of trusting anyone. But Kareem was patient. He never rushed them, never demanded anything. He simply spoke with them, listened to their fears, and encouraged them to speak their minds. Slowly, they began to smile more often, to feel hope creeping back into their hearts. The house, once heavy with despair, started to feel a little lighter. Bilal watched this change with gratitude and wonder. For the first time in weeks, he felt that perhaps his daughters could have a future, a life beyond debt and fear. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but having Kareem by their side gave him strength. The thought of losing his daughters still haunted him, but he also felt a determination he had not felt before. He would fight, he would hope, and he would do whatever it took to protect them. As the sun set behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Bilal sat outside with his daughters. He held their hands, feeling their warmth and strength. "No one will take you," he whispered. "We will find a way. We will survive together." The girls leaned against him, feeling his love and courage, even though the fear still lingered. The story of that small village, the desperate family, and the kind rancher was just beginning. The days ahead would bring challenges, tests of courage, and difficult choices. But in that quiet moment, as the stars began to appear in the night sky, there was hope. The daughters were not property. They were human, full of life and potential, and someone kind and brave, was ready to fight for them. And so, the first chapter of their journey ended with fear, yes, but also with hope. The journey ahead would be long, and danger would come, but the spark of courage had been lit. The daughters, the father, and the rancher were now connected by trust and determination, and together, they would face whatever the world threw at them. After the tense days of fear and uncertainty, life at the ramen house began to change in small ways. The daughters still carried the worry of the cruel deal over their heads, but there was something new: hope. Kareem, the kind rancher who had promised to help, continued his visits, and slowly the girls began to trust him. Amina, the eldest, was the first to notice that Kareem treated them differently from everyone else. Unlike the moneylenders, he never looked at them as a way to solve a debt. He spoke to them as if they were smart, capable, and important. He asked questions about their schoolwork, their dreams, and their favorite stories. Amina felt something she had not felt in weeks. She felt seen, truly seen as a person, not as a problem to be solved. Fatima, the middle daughter, was more cautious. She had learned from the world that kindness often came with strings attached, but Karim never demanded anything in return for his help. He would bring food, tools, and small gifts to make life easier, and he would simply smile and say, "You all deserve better." Fatima slowly began to trust him, seeing that his kindness was genuine. She even began sharing her thoughts with him, telling him small stories about their family and their dreams for the future. Sana, the youngest, was the most curious of the three. She was fascinated by Karim's ranch and all the animals he cared for. Whenever he visited, she would run ahead to see the cows, the chickens, and the small garden he had created. Karim would patiently explain how he took care of them, teaching her about responsibility, patience, and respect. Sana's laughter would fill the quiet corners of the ramen house, reminding everyone that life could still have joy, even in difficult times. Karim understood that helping the girls was not only about protecting them physically. He needed to give them hope, to show them that they had worth and could control at least some part of their own lives. He began teaching them small skills that would help them in the future. Amina learned to read letters and documents, understanding the world beyond the village. Fatima learned to care for plants and animals, skills that could support them if they ever had their own land. Sana learned about courage, even in small acts, like speaking up when she felt afraid. The villagers began to notice Karim's visits, though few dared to speak openly. Some whispered that the rancher was brave, willing to stand against the powerful moneylenders. Others said it was dangerous to interfere, that Karim risked much by helping the Rahman family. Karim ignored the whispers, focusing only on the task at hand, protecting the daughters and restoring hope to the family. One day, while Amina was gathering water from the well, Karim approached with a serious look. "Amina," he said gently, "I want you to know something very important. You are not property. You are not a debt. You are human and your life has value. Never forget that." Amina's eyes widened. She had heard these words before from her father, but hearing them from someone outside her family gave them weight. She felt a spark of courage she had not known she possessed. "I will remember," she whispered, gripping the bucket tightly. Karim nodded, knowing that courage, even in small amounts, could grow into something powerful. The family continued to live under the shadow of the moneylender's threat, but Karim's visits made life more bearable. Sometimes he would stay late, talking with the girls by candlelight, teaching them about the world beyond their small village. He told them stories of people who had faced impossible odds and still survived, emphasizing that kindness and courage could make a difference, even against great injustice. Bilal, the father, watched these interactions with gratitude and awe. He felt a sense of relief that he had not felt in weeks. Karim's presence gave him hope, yes, but it also reminded him that there were people in the world who saw the humanity in others. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to imagine a future where his daughters could live freely, without fear of being taken as payment. But the threat of the moneylenders was never far away. One afternoon, the eldest daughter noticed two strangers standing at the edge of their field, watching the house. Her heart pounded in her chest. She ran to her father, telling him what she saw. Bilal's hands shook slightly, but he remained calm, understanding that fear could not guide their actions. He signaled to Karim, who was nearby, and together they observed the strangers from a distance. Karim's mind worked quickly. "They are watching," he said quietly. "We must be careful, but we are not powerless. There is still a way to protect the girls." He explained a plan to Bilal that involved small, cautious steps to keep the family safe while seeking help from trusted villagers. They could not act recklessly, but they could also not do nothing. Courage, he reminded Bilal, was not the absence of fear. It was action in the face of fear. The daughters began to notice subtle changes in their lives. Karim would help repair broken fences and bring seeds for the garden, allowing the family to grow some food on their own. He also began introducing the girls to villagers who were trustworthy, people who could offer advice, protection, or even small jobs. Slowly, the network of support around the Raman family grew. The girls felt stronger because they knew they were not alone. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, Karim sat with the girls under a large tree near the house. He spoke softly about courage and humanity. "No matter what happens," he said, "you must remember that you have a voice. You have choices. You are not less than anyone else, and no one has the right to treat you as if you were less than human." The girls listened intently. Amina felt determination rising in her chest. She wanted to learn everything she could from Karim, so that one day she could help others as he was helping them. Fatima felt a warmth she had not known in weeks, realizing that kindness could exist even in a world filled with hardship. Sana, with her ever-curious heart, felt brave. She promised herself that she would never let fear stop her from being who she was. Karim also worked quietly behind the scenes, speaking to other villagers and seeking ways to challenge the moneylenders without putting the girls in danger. He understood that direct confrontation could be risky, but small actions, patience, and strategy could change the outcome. Every visit, every conversation, every small act of kindness became a shield for the daughters, protecting them in ways that were not always visible. Weeks passed and the girls grew stronger, more confident. The bond between them and Karim deepened, built on trust, respect, and the knowledge that someone truly cared for them. The house, once filled with tension and fear, now carried small moments of laughter, learning, and hope. The family still faced challenges, but they faced them together, supported by courage and kindness. One day the daughters were working in the garden when Amina looked up at Karim and said, "We are not afraid anymore. Not completely." Karim smiled. "Fear may never disappear completely," he replied, "but courage is stronger than fear. And together we will face whatever comes." The girls felt a sense of pride and strength they had not felt before. The story of these small days, simple acts of kindness, quiet lessons, growing courage, was only the beginning. The danger of the moneylenders had not vanished, but the daughters now knew that they had allies. They had someone who saw their humanity, who would fight for them, and who would never treat them as objects to be traded. As the night fell and the stars appeared in the sky, the Rahman family felt a fragile but real sense of hope. It was hope born from courage, from kindness, and from the understanding that even in the darkest times, people could choose to see humanity instead of greed. The daughters went asleep that night with hearts a little lighter, knowing that they were seen, respected, and protected. And so, the second part of their journey ended with the daughters beginning to understand that their lives mattered, that they were more than a debt to be paid, and that someone was willing to risk much to keep them safe. The seeds of courage had been planted, and though the path ahead would be difficult, they now walked it with hope in their hearts. Life for the Rahman family had begun to feel slightly safer with Karim's support, but danger still hovered on the edges of every day. The moneylenders had not disappeared. They still watched from a distance, their presence like a shadow over the family. Bilal and his daughters knew that hope alone could not protect them. Action was needed, careful and clever action, or the cruel threat would never end. Karim understood this well. He knew that protecting the daughters required more than just kindness. It required planning, strategy, and allies. He spent long hours thinking quietly, pacing along the small garden behind the Rahman house. He considered every possible danger. What if the moneylenders came suddenly? What if someone in the village betrayed them? What if the daughters were lured away without warning? Each scenario was frightening, but Karim refused to give in to fear. He knew that preparation was the first step to courage. One morning, Karim visited the family earlier than usual. Bilal and the daughters were already awake, tending to the garden and feeding the small animals they had managed to keep. Karim greeted them warmly and asked Amina to sit with him. "We need to plan carefully," he said, his voice calm but serious. "The threat is real, but we are not powerless. There is a way to protect you, to ensure that no one can treat you as payment." Amina listened intently. She could feel her heart pounding with both fear and hope. She was learning quickly that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. Karim explained that they would need help, not just from him, but from people they could trust in the village. Together, they would create a small network of allies who could watch, protect, and support the family if danger came. Fatima, sitting quietly nearby, asked nervously, "What if someone sees us planning? What if the moneylenders find out?" Karim nodded, understanding her concern. "We must be careful," he said, "but we cannot do nothing. Courage sometimes requires small risks. If we act wisely, we can keep the girls safe and protect the family." The first step was to identify villagers who could be trusted. Karim had spent years in the area and knew which people were fair, kind, and discreet. He quietly approached a few, explaining the situation without revealing too much, so that only those truly loyal and compassionate would get involved. These villagers agreed to help, each in their own way. Some would keep an eye on the house, others would bring supplies, and a few would offer advice on how to deal with the moneylenders. Meanwhile, Karim began teaching the daughters small, practical skills that would help them in a crisis. Amina learned how to send messages secretly, using small notes and signals. Fatima learned basic survival skills, like preparing food and caring for animals quietly. Sana, despite her young age, learned to be alert, noticing details in her surroundings that adults sometimes missed. Karim explained that these skills were not for fear alone. They were tools to help them feel strong and capable. The daughters practiced these lessons with curiosity and care. At first, it was difficult to imagine that such small acts could matter, but Karim showed them how courage often comes in small steps. He told them stories of people who had survived impossible situations through clever thinking and quiet bravery. "Courage does not always roar," he said. "Sometimes it is the quiet voice at the end of the day saying, 'I will try again tomorrow.'" As the plan took shape, tension in the village grew. The moneylenders noticed that the Rahman family seemed less fearful, more confident. They began sending men to observe from a distance, trying to understand what had changed. Karim was aware of this and advised Bilal and the daughters to act normally, to keep their routines as ordinary as possible. "We do not want to attract unnecessary attention," he said, "but we are ready if they try anything." Bilal found new strength in this plan. For weeks he had felt powerless, weighed down by fear and despair. But now, with Karim's guidance, he realized that action, even careful and cautious, could make a difference. He began to take small steps to improve the household, repair fences, tend the garden, and ensure the daughters felt safe. Every effort, no matter how small, was a part of the larger plan to protect them. The daughters themselves were learning to feel empowered. Amina took on the role of quietly observing the surroundings, noting any unusual activity near the house. Fatima helped organize supplies and learned to act quickly if danger approached. Sana, despite her playful nature, became more attentive, noticing even small changes in the environment. Each of them, guided by Karim, realized that they had a role to play in their own protection. One evening, Karim gathered the family in the small living room. He spoke carefully, explaining the final part of the plan. "If the moneylenders try to take the daughters, we will not give in. We will use every resource, every ally to ensure they cannot harm you. But we must remain calm, organized, and careful. Courage is most powerful when it is paired with wisdom." The daughters listened silently, understanding the gravity of the situation. Fear was still present, but it was now accompanied by determination. They were not helpless anymore. They had a plan, allies, and knowledge. The feeling was new, exciting, and empowering. For the first time, they imagined a life where they could make choices and influence what happened to them. Karim also worked on building bridges with the village leaders. He approached them privately, explaining the situation in ways that highlighted fairness, respect, and justice. He did not speak against the moneylenders directly, but he made it clear that the community should protect the Rahman family. Some leaders agreed quietly, offering discreet support. The plan was not just about defending the daughters, it was about creating a community that valued human life over greed. Days turned into weeks as the plan progressed. Karim and the family practiced routines, small signals, and contingency steps. The daughters learned to respond calmly, even when their hearts raced. They began to understand that preparation and courage could reduce fear and give them control over their own lives. They no longer felt trapped by circumstance. They felt part of a team, working together to protect their family. One afternoon, as Karim walked with Amina through the fields, he noticed her confidence growing. She asked questions about the wider world, about laws, and about ways to defend oneself without violence. Karim smiled, proud of her curiosity and intelligence. "Knowledge is courage too," he said. "Understanding your options gives you strength." The moneylenders, sensing that something was changing, began to show frustration. They sent more men to observe, hoping to find a weakness in the Rahman family's defenses. But Karim had thought of everything, and the villagers he had trusted were alert. The plan was working. The daughters, once terrified of every shadow, now moved with awareness and confidence. They were no longer passive in their fate. They were active participants in their own protection. Even Bilal, who had felt helpless for so long, now felt empowered. He could see the difference that courage, planning, and community support made. He watched his daughters, seeing them grow stronger, and he felt hope fill his heart. The family still faced a dangerous situation, but they faced it together, united by love, strategy, and bravery. One quiet evening, as the sun set behind the hills, Karim sat with the daughters under the large tree near their home. He looked at them and said, "The days ahead may be difficult, but you are not powerless. Courage, planning, and unity will guide us. You are not property, and no one has the right to treat you as such. Remember this always." The daughters nodded, their eyes reflecting both fear and determination. They understood that danger still existed, but they also understood that they were stronger than they had been. They had allies, knowledge, and courage. They had someone who truly saw their humanity, and they had each other. That night, as the stars filled the sky, the Rahman family slept with a mixture of caution and hope. They had prepared, learned, and bonded. They were ready to face whatever came next. The journey was far from over, but the seeds of courage, unity, and wisdom had been planted. The daughters, once threatened by the cruelty of debt and greed, now had a chance to take control of their own lives. And so, part 3 of their story ended with careful planning, growing confidence, and the promise that no one, not even the most powerful moneylenders, could take their humanity away. The family's courage was rising, quietly but surely, like the sun over the village each morning, ready to light the path ahead. The days of careful preparation had finally led to a moment that Bilal and his daughters had feared, and yet knew might come. The moneylenders, frustrated by the family's growing confidence and Karim's quiet interventions, had decided to confront them directly. Tension ran through the village like a current, with whispers spreading about the approaching threat. Everyone could sense that the Rahman family's lives were about to face a crucial test. Bilal awoke early that morning, feeling a mixture of fear and determination. He looked at his daughters, Amina, Fatima, and little Sana, sleeping quietly in the corner of the small, worn room. He felt a surge of protective love. "Today," he whispered softly, "we stand together. No one will take you." The girls, sensing the seriousness in his voice, stirred slightly but trusted him completely. Karim arrived shortly after dawn. His usual calm demeanor hid a mind working rapidly through every possible scenario. He had already spoken to the trusted villagers, arranging for them to be near the house at a safe distance, ready to intervene if the moneylenders acted violently. Karim knew that force alone might not be enough, but courage, strategy, and unity could create a shield stronger than fear itself. When the moneylenders finally arrived, their faces were stern and their tone harsh. They demanded payment once again, their eyes flicking toward the daughters as if to remind Bilal of the cruel deal they had proposed before. "You have not paid," one of them said, "so we will take what is owed. We warned you." The words were meant to intimidate, to make the family shrink back in fear, but this time the response was different. Karim stepped forward calmly, placing himself slightly between the moneylenders and the daughters. "You will not harm these children," he said firmly. "They are human, not property. No one has the right to treat them as a debt." The words rang clear and strong, and for a moment the moneylenders looked surprised. They had expected fear, submission, and weakness. They had not expected courage, strategy, and community support. Bilal found his voice as well. "My daughters are my family," he said, his hands steady despite his racing heart. "They are not objects, and you will not take them. We are working to pay what we can, but you will not treat them as property." His words, though simple, carried the weight of a father's love and determination. The daughters, standing behind him, felt a surge of strength. They were part of this moment, and they realized that courage could take many forms. The village, quietly watching from a distance, began to show its support. A few trusted villagers stepped closer, their presence a silent but powerful message. The family was not alone. Karim had worked tirelessly to ensure that the community understood what was happening, and now the strength of unity began to make itself felt. The moneylenders, who had counted on isolation and fear, began to feel the pressure of the village's quiet defiance. One of the moneylenders tried to intimidate the girls directly, stepping forward with a harsh tone. But Amina, remembering Karim's lessons, spoke calmly yet firmly. "We are not yours to take," she said. "We are human beings. You cannot make us objects for your debt." Her voice, though young, carried authority and courage. Fatima stood beside her, her eyes steady, and little Sana held her sister's hand, drawing strength from the unity around them. The confrontation was tense, each side measuring the other. The moneylenders tried to argue, to demand submission, but Karim and the villagers did not waver. Karim calmly outlined an alternative. The family would work to repay the debt in a fair manner, step by step, and the daughters would not be touched. The moneylenders, realizing that force alone would not work and that the village now supported the Rahman family, hesitated. As the minutes passed, the atmosphere shifted. The moneylenders' confidence began to falter. They had counted on fear and isolation, but they found themselves facing courage, planning, and community support. Karim spoke again, his voice steady and unwavering. "You have no right to threaten children. Their lives are not your property. Leave now, and we will find a fair way to resolve the debt." Finally, the moneylenders backed down, their harsh expressions replaced with reluctant acceptance. They left the village, muttering among themselves, clearly frustrated but unable to act against the united front. The threat that had hung over the Rahman family for so long had been confronted, and the daughters had remained safe. For the first time in weeks, the family felt a true sense of relief. The aftermath of the confrontation was quiet but powerful. Bilal hugged his daughters tightly, tears of relief streaming down his face. "You were brave," he said. "You all stood strong and no one could take you." Amina, Fatima, and Sana smiled, feeling the weight of fear lift slightly. They realized that courage, preparation, and unity had created a shield stronger than any threat. Karim stayed with the family for a while, helping them process what had happened. He praised their bravery and reminded them that even though danger existed, their actions had made a difference. "You were not passive," he said. "You spoke, you acted, and you protected yourselves." Courage is not only about fighting, it is about standing firm, knowing what is right, and trusting that you are not alone. The villagers who had supported the family quietly began to share the story of the confrontation. The tale spread slowly, emphasizing courage, unity, and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. People in the village began to reflect on their own actions, realizing that silence could allow injustice to thrive, but collective action could create safety and fairness. The Rahman family, once isolated and fearful, now stood as a symbol of strength and hope. In the days that followed, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The daughters returned to their studies, the garden grew under their care, and the small animals thrived. Bilal found renewed determination to work and provide for his family, knowing that they could now live without the constant shadow of fear. Karim continued to guide them, but now the daughters were learning to act with courage and wisdom on their own. Amina, especially, had grown in confidence. She began helping her sisters organize their routines and think ahead about potential challenges. Fatima focused on practical skills, ensuring that the family could remain independent and strong. Sana, though still playful, had learned to observe, listen, and act when necessary. The daughters were no longer passive victims, they were active participants in their own lives. Bilal reflected on the transformation in his family. The fear that had once dominated their home had been replaced by courage, unity, and hope. The daughters, once threatened by the cruel idea of being treated as payment, now stood tall, knowing that their humanity was recognized and respected. Karim had not only protected them physically, but had taught them lessons that would stay with them for a lifetime. Even the village, influenced by the events, began to change. People realized that justice and compassion could have a tangible impact. They saw that standing together could protect the vulnerable and challenge injustice. The story of the Rahman family became a quiet inspiration, a reminder that courage, planning, and kindness could overcome fear and oppression. One evening, as the sun set over the village, Bilal and his daughters sat outside their home. The air was calm and the sky glowed with soft colors. Karim joined them, smiling quietly. "You have shown bravery," he said. "You have faced fear and stood strong. Remember this feeling and remember that courage is always within you, even when the path ahead is uncertain." The daughters listened, feeling a deep sense of pride and relief. They had faced a threat that had seemed impossible, and they had survived. They had learned that courage was not about being fearless, but about standing firm, trusting in themselves and others, and taking action to protect what mattered most. And so, part 4 of their story ended with victory and growth. The moneylenders had been confronted, the daughters remained safe, and the family had discovered the power of courage, unity, and community support. Though challenges still lay ahead, they were no longer paralyzed by fear. They had learned that standing together, planning wisely, and acting with courage could overcome even the most daunting threats. The story was far from over, but the family had taken a crucial step. The daughters, once threatened by greed and cruelty, had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. They had seen firsthand that humanity and compassion could triumph over fear and injustice. And with Karim's guidance and the support of the village, they were ready to face whatever the future might hold. After the confrontation with the moneylenders, life for the Rahman family began to take a new direction. The heavy cloud of fear that had hung over the house for months had lifted, replaced by cautious optimism. Bilal felt a weight lift from his shoulders, and the daughters, Amina, Fatima, and Sana, slowly began to understand what it meant to live without constant fear. They had survived the threat, and now, with Karim's guidance and the support of the village, they could focus on rebuilding their lives. The first days of their new life were filled with small but meaningful activities. Bilal worked harder on the land, planting new crops with hope rather than despair. Karim visited often, bringing tools, seeds, and advice on how to make the farm productive again. The daughters helped, learning valuable skills in agriculture and management. They realized that their hard work could lead to independence and security, and that every small step mattered. Amina, the eldest, began to take on a leadership role in the household. She organized the daily chores, helped her father plan the work on the farm, and guided her younger sisters. She felt a growing sense of responsibility, but also pride in what she could contribute. Karim often encouraged her, teaching her that leadership was not about control, but about helping others, protecting them, and guiding them wisely. Fatima focused on the practical side of life. She tended the garden carefully, ensured that the small animals were healthy, and learned ways to store food and resources efficiently. She found joy in nurturing life, whether plants, animals, or her sisters. Karim taught her that practical skills could be powerful tools for independence, giving her confidence that she could help her family survive and thrive. Sana, though still playful, had grown more aware and responsible. She observed her surroundings carefully, learned to help in small but meaningful ways, and developed a sense of courage that matched her curiosity. Karim reminded her that bravery could be quiet and gentle, and she began to understand that her small actions, like alerting her family to danger or helping with tasks, were acts of courage. The village, inspired by the Rahman family's resilience, began to show quiet but steady support. Neighbors offered advice, shared resources, and helped the family when needed. People who had once been silent about the injustice now spoke about the importance of protecting children and treating everyone with respect. The Rahman family had become a symbol of courage, teaching the village that standing together could create real change. Karim continued to mentor the daughters, not just in practical skills but in life lessons. He spoke about dignity, humanity, and self-respect. He encouraged them to dream beyond the limitations of their small village, teaching them that knowledge and education could open doors to opportunities they had never imagined. He reminded them that their past hardships did not define their future, and that they had the power to shape their own lives. The daughters began to imagine a future filled with possibilities. Amina dreamed of continuing her education, learning more about the world, and helping others who faced similar challenges. Fatima hoped to become skilled in caring for animals and plants, creating a life of independence and stability for herself and her family. Sana, still full of curiosity, wanted to explore, learn, and experience the world beyond their small village. For the first time, their dreams felt possible, no longer limited by fear or oppression. Bilal watched with pride and relief as his daughters grew stronger, more confident, and full of hope. He realized that the greatest gift he could give them was not just protection, but the ability to believe in themselves. Karim's guidance had shown them that courage, planning, and kindness could overcome even the most difficult challenges. Bilal felt deep gratitude for the rancher who had seen the humanity in his daughters when others had seen only a debt to be paid. The family also began to repair the emotional damage caused by months of fear. They laughed together, shared stories of small victories, and celebrated moments of joy that had once seemed impossible. Amina helped Fatima and Sana feel safe and valued. Fatima nurtured the garden and the small animals, teaching her sisters patience and care. Sana's playful energy brought lightness and happiness into the home, reminding everyone that life could be joyful even after hardship. The Rahman family also learned the importance of giving back. With Karim's encouragement, they began helping neighbors in small ways, whether by sharing food, lending a hand on farms, or offering guidance to younger children. They realized that their experience had taught them empathy, courage, and wisdom, and that these qualities could benefit the wider community. By helping others, they reinforced the values of compassion and unity that had saved them. Over time, the daughters gained confidence in facing the world. They learned that courage was not just about confronting threats, but also about making choices that honored their values. They understood that every small act of honesty, kindness, or bravery was a step toward building a life of dignity. The fear that had once defined their days was replaced by determination and hope, and they carried these lessons into every aspect of their lives. Bilal, too, found renewed purpose. He no longer felt the crushing weight of despair. Instead, he focused on creating a stable, loving environment for his daughters. He worked tirelessly, supported by Karim and the village, but he also allowed himself to enjoy moments of happiness with his family. The bond between father and daughters grew stronger, rooted in shared struggle, courage, and love. Karim continued to guide them, but he also stepped back at times, allowing the daughters and Bilal to make decisions on their own. He knew that true empowerment came from independence, not constant guidance. The daughters learned to solve problems, face challenges, and protect themselves with wisdom and courage. They were no longer passive recipients of protection. They were active participants in shaping their lives. One day, as the family gathered in the garden, Bilal looked at his daughters and said, "We have faced fear, danger, and injustice, but we have survived. We have learned that courage, love, and kindness are stronger than any threat. You are safe, and you are free to dream." The daughters smiled, feeling the truth of their father's words in their hearts. The story of their journey spread quietly throughout the village, inspiring others to stand against injustice and treat children with respect. People began to speak openly about the importance of protecting the vulnerable, supporting families, and valuing humanity over greed. The Rahman family, once threatened and fearful, had become a symbol of resilience, courage, and hope. Amina, Fatima, and Sana each began to see a future filled with opportunity. They studied, worked, and dreamed, knowing that their lives were their own. They understood that the struggles they had faced had taught them strength, patience, and empathy, and that these lessons would guide them for the rest of their lives. Karim's mentorship had given them tools, but their own courage and determination had allowed them to grow and thrive. Bilal, reflecting on the journey, realized that the greatest victory was not simply surviving the moneylender's threat, but seeing his daughters flourish. He had learned that courage, planning, and community support could overcome even the darkest moments. He felt profound gratitude for Karim, for the villagers who had stood with them, and for his daughters, who had shown bravery beyond their years. The family's home, once heavy with fear, was now filled with laughter, learning, and hope. They continued to work hard, but now every effort was infused with purpose and optimism. The daughters were safe, valued, and empowered, and the village had learned an important lesson about compassion, justice, and human dignity. In the evenings, the family would sit together under the stars, reflecting on their journey. They spoke of challenges, victories, and dreams for the future. Karim often joined them, offering guidance and encouragement, but he also listened, learning from the daughters' insights and resilience. Together, they celebrated the power of courage, kindness, and unity. The story of the Rahman family ended not with fear or oppression, but with hope, empowerment, and growth. The daughters had survived a threat that could have changed their lives forever, but they had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the future. They had learned that humanity, compassion, and courage could overcome even the most difficult challenges. And so, the final chapter of their journey showed that life, even after hardship, could be full of possibility. The daughters, once threatened by greed and cruelty, were now free to learn, dream, and grow. The family, supported by Karim and the village, had discovered the power of unity, planning, and courage. Their story was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the importance of seeing every person as human, never as property. In the end, the Rahman family's lives were transformed. Fear had been replaced by hope. Danger had been replaced by courage. And the daughters, once threatened by a cruel and unjust deal, were now free, empowered, and full of dreams for the future. The story left a lasting message. No one should ever be treated as property, and kindness, courage, and determination can change lives forever.